Hi everyone, this is Adrian and I'm your host for Rolling Stories, a podcast supported by Rolling Arrays. And today we're very excited to be speaking with Sud. He is the CEO and founder of impress.ai. Sud is someone that I have known for quite some time, and he's really the one person that has taught me a lot about conversational AI and how that has helped many companies to accelerate recruitment. I'll leave it more to him and shed more light on that. But let's start off by perhaps giving people and listeners a precursor to exactly the things that you're doing, your role in it, before we jump straight into our discussion.
Definitely. Thank you, Adrian. Happy to be here. So just a quick introduction of what we do and my role in the company. Impress AI is really a workflow automation platform for recruiting, mostly for large enterprises, but we have some smaller enterprises as well. What we help recruiting teams do is whatever process that they're running today, we help them structure it and automate it so that it runs as autonomously as possible. We also focus a lot on the candidate experience. In fact, we are taking ourselves a journey from candidate experience to candidate delight. So that's really what the product is about, end-to-end workflow automation in recruiting processes.
Could you help us to understand what is the kind of cost, be it time cost, monetary cost involved when your recruitment cycle or your time to fill is actually too long?
Yeah, I mean, if you ask candidates, if candidates don't hear back within 2 weeks, they already have lost interest in the role. They're usually thinking about the next company. So I mean, that's how
I
cost
think you're
per
being generous
hire.
with 2 weeks.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, these days candidates have a lot more options, so that might actually be shorter. So it's important to keep the candidate engaged, keep them posted, move things fast, so that we don't lose the candidate. And losing a candidate in a process means that you have to go outsource again. That's really where all the cost comes from. Of course, there are estimates of cost per hire that goes into thousands of dollars. Depends on how senior the role is, and of course, for some roles, it's several months of salary that people say cost per hire. And a large part of that, a large percentage of that comes from actually having to source and select the right candidates.
Earlier on, you actually mentioned a term which is the first time I've heard of when it comes to enterprise recruiting, which is candidate delight. Obviously, we have heard of candidate experience, but candidate delight is the first time I've heard of it. How does it actually differ from the candidate experience that most companies are trying to provide across? And essentially, what are you trying to achieve here?
I think things have gotten harder over the past 2 years, and the power balance has shifted more and more from employers to talent. It had already been shifting for a decade, to be honest. The power balance had been shifting as options for skilled workforce have increased. But over the past 2 years, I think it hit kind of extremes where candidates and talent across so many industries hit a peak, and that's where it became almost not enough to deliver a good experience to candidates. In fact, the expectations from that recruitment experience, from the hiring experience, really shot up. And that's what happens, right? If every company is competing for a limited pool of talent, they start to compete on experience, they start to compete on compensation. But how much can you increase compensation, right? It becomes unsustainable at some point. So that's where the concept of candidate delight started to come in for us, because we saw how companies are starting to compete to get the attention of talent. And we saw certain examples of delight where companies are surprising candidates with unexpected kind of things. Some companies are starting to offer, gifts or swag, or just for going through the hiring process. So it's not just delivering a good interface and good IT experience when it comes to the technology platform being used, but it's also becoming about leaving the candidate happy with anything that they face or do, and how they spend their time while applying for a role.
All the swags and hardwares obviously would be things that people would really appreciate, whether they take on the job or not. And from the HR perspective, of course, since we are on the topic of enterprise software, is there a part that enterprise software, especially enterprise recruitment software, can play in emphasizing on candidate delight?
Yeah, definitely. So, Impressia has collected a lot of data across the hiring process, because we cover the end-to-end recruiting process for many companies. For other companies, we cover parts of the recruiting process. So we get insight into, what's sort of steps lead to what sort of conversion levels. When candidates fill in their application, they upload their resume, they go through assessments, we can see where the drop off is happening, what is it that candidates like and dislike. So we have spotted areas where the most drop off happens, and the most drop off may happen at areas where the candidate is expected to do certain assessments, for example, where they're asked to upload their resume. Those are some of the areas where a lot of drop off happens, and of course if you don't get back to them, that's where drop off happens. So with enterprise software, our opinion on this is and the way we're thinking about solving this problem is the whole experience can start to be gamified, and that's something that we're working on as kind of the next iteration of our product as well. So really early days for things that we're thinking of, but it will be some kind of a reward mechanism that enterprise software will start to offer to candidates. So you finish certain steps, you complete certain steps, you earn some kind of points or some kind of surprises. And you continue to gather those points while you're completing the hiring process. At the end, of course, you may actually not take up the role or anything, but at least I think there have to be sort of some incentivization systems. And I have more to talk about on this. I can go into further details how we think about this, but that's something that we are actively thinking about.
Talent acquisitions professionals who are in enterprises, as they face head-on in this talent of war against all the other competing enterprises, are there any advice or tips you'd like to share with them on things to really start looking at, stop doing, or maybe to change the way they approach recruitment?
Yeah, definitely. I think just top of the list, what to stop doing is probably the number of interviews, right? And you had written about this in one of your posts, Adrian, companies having so many rounds of interviews. That is just not something that can be sustained in this market. Not just it's inefficient for everyone involved, it's just not something candidates are okay with anymore, because companies are making decisions in 3 rounds of interviews at most. So I think a lot more companies need to move closer to that. So that's something to stop doing, having too many rounds of interviews. The things that I've seen as positive, of course, there is companies are starting to combine rounds. So after maybe the first qualification rounds, they call all the 4 or 5 people that need to interview the candidate, just have the same common slot, ask what needs to be asked, or slot them right after the other, so that the decision can be reached on the same day or the next day. And this is an example that one of the companies I spoke to again gave to me. What can companies start to do more of? Again, I think highlighting benefits. If we think about the journey of a candidate when they look for a new role, it's a process of getting more and more invested. No candidate is invested in a recruitment process right up front. So that is that they're just looking around, right? They're looking at what's out there, they're exploring, they're clicking the apply button on a lot of different job posts, but not really digging in deep at that point. Most candidates will start to dig deeper once they have gotten to, they've gotten to speak to someone or gotten some information that's been sent their way, and that's somehow hooked them to the company. So what can we do, right? What can companies do in that case? Now, because we know from a lot of these surveys and trends that have come out, candidates really care about mission-driven organizations. They care about benefits, flexibility, learning opportunity. So how can we start to put these up front for candidates? In execution terms, we can write more articles, right, and publish them on our LinkedIn page. So the company's LinkedIn page should have more and more information about the company culture, the mission, and those sort of things. So online presence on social media is absolutely critical across social media, talking about benefits and so on. The recruiting experience, the application experience should highlight the benefits as well, very well. So those are some of the things that I think companies can start to reduce, in terms of doing too many rounds of interviews, and what they can do more of is highlight what's good about them.
I think to your last point, that's a really great observation. I think it's just not many years ago, everyone actually started as generalists coming into the workforce, and then the trend became more of a specialist role. You just have to be good in that function. But as we move into modern days, it seems like, yes, you still have to be a specialist, but you have to be a specialist in many different areas, which honestly is just a sexier term for being a generalist. So we seem to have gone one big round to arrive where we were before. But it's an interesting take to look at, because it also means when it comes to the recruitment, the way you even put up your job description, it may have to differ slightly, given that you would want to target people who are specialists in many different areas, and that could also be a very unique competitive edge that a company may have. And with that, I am really thankful for your time today. And for listeners who is keen to learn more about yourself as well as your company, where can they go to?
They go to our website, impress.ai. Easy to remember, that's our product name as well. Just reach out to us and connect with me on LinkedIn. I think we'll put a link in the description. Happy to talk.
Awesome. So thank you so much for your time, and I'll put all this in the show notes, and I wish all the best for you in your rest of the journey with impress.ai.
Thank you so much, Adrian.